The first time Fiona Vance saw blood on her knuckles, she knew her life would never be the same. Standing over the unconscious body of Jasper Mills, the town's most notorious drunkard, she felt no remorse, only the fierce protectiveness that had surged through her when he'd laid his filthy hands on her 12-year-old sister, Ellie. Willow Creek, Colorado, 1878, was no place for a woman with a reputation for violence, no matter how justified. But as Fiona helped her sobbing sister to her feet, smoothing Ellie's torn dress collar and wiping away the tears streaking through the dust on her cheeks, she couldn't bring herself to regret what she'd done. "It's all right now," Fiona whispered, tucking a strand of Ellie's honey-colored hair behind her ear. "He won't touch you again." "But Fiona, he's the mayor's cousin," Ellie stammered, her wide blue eyes darting to the growing crowd gathering around them outside the general store. "You knocked him out cold." Fiona set her jaw. At 22, she'd long since learned that being an orphan meant the rules were different for the Vance sisters. Ever since their parents had died of fever 3 years prior, she'd been the only thing standing between Ellie and the harsh realities of the frontier. "Miss Vance," the booming voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. Sheriff Thomas Blackwood pushed his way through the onlookers, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. His small eyes narrowed as they took in the scene. Jasper sprawled in the dirt, blood trickling from his nose, and Fiona standing defiantly beside her trembling sister. "What in God's name happened here?" the sheriff demanded, though the twist of his mouth suggested he'd already decided who was at fault. "He tried to drag my sister behind the feed store," Fiona said evenly, lifting her chin. "Said he wanted to show her something pretty." The sheriff's gaze flickered briefly to Ellie, whose tear-stained face and disheveled appearance should have confirmed the truth of Fiona's words. But Jasper Mills was groaning now, pushing himself up on his elbows, and Sheriff Blackwood was already helping him to his feet. "She's lying," Jasper slurred, wiping blood from his face with the back of his hand. "I was just being friendly to the girl, and this wildcat attacked me for no reason." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke up, though several women exchanged knowing glances. Jasper's reputation with young girls was well known, but his family connections made him untouchable. "That true, little miss?" the sheriff asked Ellie, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. Before Ellie could speak, Fiona stepped forward. "My sister doesn't need to say anything. I saw what happened with my own eyes." The sheriff's expression hardened. "Seems to me you've got a problem with respecting the men of this town, Miss Vance. This isn't the first time you've caused trouble." "Defending my sister isn't causing trouble," Fiona retorted, though she knew her words were falling on deaf ears. Sheriff Blackwood's hand closed around her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You'll come with me to sort this out properly." "No," Ellie cried, grabbing for Fiona's other arm. "Please don't take her." "It's all right, Ellie," Fiona said with a calmness she didn't feel. "Go to Mrs. Winters at the boarding house. Tell her what happened. I'll be back soon." As the sheriff dragged her toward the jailhouse, Fiona caught sight of a tall figure watching from the shadowed doorway of the saloon across the street. A stranger with intense eyes beneath the brim of a weather-worn hat. For a moment, their gazes locked, and something like recognition passed between them, though Fiona was certain she'd never seen him before. Then the sheriff yanked her forward, and the moment was gone. The jailhouse was a small building of rough-hewn logs, containing 2 cells and an office area where Sheriff Blackwood kept his desk and a pot-bellied stove. He shoved Fiona inside and slammed the door behind them. "You've been nothing but trouble since your parents passed," he growled, releasing her arm but positioning himself between her and the door. "This town's been generous, letting you keep that teaching position at the school, giving you and your sister a room at the boarding house. And this is how you repay that kindness. By protecting my sister from a predator, Fiona challenged, rubbing her arm where his fingers had left marks. If that's being troublesome, then yes, I'm guilty. The sheriff's face darkened. You're getting above yourself, girl. Jasper Mills comes from one of the founding families of Willow Creek. His cousin is the mayor. Who are you to lay hands on him? I'm a woman who won't stand by while a drunkard molests my sister, Fiona said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And if you were doing your job properly, Sheriff, men like Jasper wouldn't feel free to prey on young girls. The blow came without warning, the back of Blackwood's hand catching her across the cheek with enough force to send her stumbling against the desk. The taste of blood filled her mouth as she caught herself. That's assaulting an officer, the sheriff said coldly. I reckon that earns you a night in the cell to cool that temper. Fiona straightened, touching her fingers to her split lip. Everyone in town will know what you've done. And who'll believe the word of an uppity orphan girl against the sheriff? Blackwood sneered, reaching for her again. The door to the jailhouse swung open, letting in a shaft of afternoon sunlight and the imposing silhouette of a man. I'd believe her, said a deep voice that seemed to fill the small room. Sheriff Blackwood turned, his hand instinctively moving to his gun. This is official business, stranger. I suggest you move along. The man stepped fully into the jailhouse, and Fiona recognized him as the observer from the saloon doorway. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality, and the gun belt at his hip looked well used. Name's Ryder Weston, he said, tipping his hat slightly. Just rode into town. Couldn't help noticing that you seem to have an unusual way of upholding the law, Sheriff. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. You're interfering with justice, Weston. Am I? Ryder's gaze moved to Fiona, taking in her reddened cheek and bleeding lip. Looks more like I'm witnessing an abuse of power. This woman assaulted a respected citizen, the sheriff growled. After he tried to molest my 12-year-old sister, Fiona added, finding her voice. Ryder nodded slowly. Where I come from, a man who protects children is considered honorable, a man who hurts women. He let the sentence hang unfinished, but his meaning was clear. For a moment, tension crackled in the small room. Then Blackwood took a step back, his expression calculating. You new in town, Weston. Planning to stay long? Depends on what I find here, Ryder replied evenly. Right now, I'm not particularly impressed with the local law enforcement. The sheriff's jaw worked, but he was clearly reassessing the situation. Ryder Weston carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew how to handle trouble, and the well-worn Colt at his hip wasn't there for show. Miss Vance here was just leaving, Blackwood said finally, after a warning about disturbing the peace. Fiona looked between the two men, scarcely believing the sheriff's sudden change of heart. I can go, for now, Blackwood said, his eyes cold with promise. But this isn't over. You do well to remember your place in this town. I'll see Miss Vance safely to her destination, Ryder said, not quite making it a request. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street. Fiona took a deep breath of fresh air, still tasting blood on her lip. Thank you, Mr. Weston, she said quietly. But you shouldn't have made an enemy of the sheriff on my account. Ryder fell into step beside her. Seems to me Sheriff Blackwood was already choosing his friends and enemies before I arrived. He glanced down at her. Are you all right, Miss Vance? Fiona, she corrected automatically. And I will be once I find my sister. You said you left her with someone named Mrs. Winters. Fiona nodded. She runs the boarding house where we live. It's just down this way. They walked in silence for a moment, Fiona acutely aware of the tall stranger beside her and the curious glances they were attracting from townsfolk. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. "You don't know me." Ryder's expression remained unreadable. "I know enough. I saw what happened outside the general store. That man Jasper. He was trouble waiting to happen. You did what any decent person would do." "Not according to Sheriff Blackwood," Fiona said bitterly. "Sheriff Blackwood strikes me as a man who values power over justice," Ryder replied. "I've seen his type before." They reached the boarding house, a two-story clapboard building with a small front porch. Before Fiona could knock, the door flew open and Ellie burst out, throwing her arms around her sister's waist. "Fiona, I was so worried. Mrs. Winters was about to send for help." Fiona hugged her sister tightly, smoothing her hair. "I'm fine, Ellie. Everything's all right now." A plump woman with graying hair appeared in the doorway, her worried expression shifting to surprise as she took in Ryder standing a respectful distance away. "Mrs. Winters, this is Mr. Ryder Weston," Fiona explained. "He intervened at the jailhouse on my behalf." Mrs. Winters studied the stranger with the shrewd assessment of a woman who had seen many men come and go in a frontier town. Whatever she saw in Ryder seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded and opened the door wider. "Then Mr. Weston has earned himself a proper meal at the very least. Dinner's nearly ready, and we've room at the table if you'd care to join us." Ryder hesitated, glancing at Fiona as if seeking her approval. "Please," she said, surprising herself with the sincerity in her voice. "It's the least we can offer." Inside, the boarding house was modest but well kept, with a large common dining room where Mrs. Winters served meals to her handful of boarders. As they entered, several heads turned their way. Mr. Patterson, the elderly clerk from the land office, the Miller sisters who ran the millinery shop, and Mr. Jenkins, the quiet widower who worked at the livery stable. Conversation halted at the sight of Fiona's bruised face and the imposing stranger beside her. "Good heavens, child," Mrs. Winters exclaimed, finally noticing Fiona's injuries in the better light. "What happened?" "Sheriff Blackwood happened," Ryder said before Fiona could answer, his voice carrying an edge that made the other boarders exchange glances. Over dinner, a hearty stew with fresh bread. Fiona recounted the day's events, with Ellie occasionally adding details. The other boarders listened in grim silence, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and resignation. "It's not right," Mr. Patterson said finally, shaking his head. "But Jasper Mills has been getting away with such behavior for years. His cousin makes sure of that. And now the sheriff's involved too," Mrs. Winters added with a disapproving cluck of her tongue. She turned to Fiona. "You know I support you, dear, but this could mean trouble for your position at the school." Fiona's heart sank. The teaching job was their only means of support. "Surely they wouldn't. The school board answers to the mayor," Mr. Jenkins said quietly. "And the mayor is Jasper's cousin." A heavy silence fell over the table. Fiona felt Ellie's hand slip into hers beneath the tablecloth, squeezing tight. "What brings you to Willow Creek, Mr. Weston?" Mrs. Winters asked, clearly trying to change the subject. Ryder set down his spoon. "I'm looking to buy some land. Heard there was good grazing country in these parts." "You're a rancher?" Mr. Patterson asked with renewed interest. "Was," Ryder corrected. "Had a spread up in Wyoming territory. Sold it after my father passed last year." "And now you're looking to start fresh," Mrs. Winters nodded approvingly. "Well, there's plenty of land available around Willow Creek, though the best parcels get snatched up quick. I'd be happy to show you the available properties," Mr. Patterson offered. Being at the land office has its advantages. As the conversation turned to ranching and land prices, Fiona caught Ryder watching her across the table. There was something in his gaze that made her breath catch a mixture of concern and something deeper, more searching. For the first time since the confrontation with Jasper, Fiona allowed herself to really look at the stranger who had come to her defense. Ryder Weston was handsome in a rugged way, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his current serious expression would indicate. His hands were strong and capable, marked with the calluses of a man accustomed to hard work. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, and Fiona felt a peculiar warmth spread through her chest. Later, as Mrs. Winters cleared the dishes with Ellie's help, Ryder approached Fiona in the small sitting room adjacent to the dining area. "Your sister seems like a brave girl," he said, his voice pitched low for privacy. "She is," Fiona agreed, pride evident in her tone. "She's had to be." "And you?" Ryder asked. "Where did you learn to throw a punch like the one that laid out Jasper Mills?" Despite everything, Fiona found herself smiling. "My father believed his daughters should know how to defend themselves. He was progressive that way." "Smart man," Ryder nodded. "Though I imagine he didn't anticipate you'd be using those skills against the mayor's cousin." "No," Fiona's smile faded, "but he would have approved nonetheless." Ryder studied her for a moment. "What will you do now if they try to take your teaching position?" The question brought back the full weight of her predicament. "I don't know," she admitted. "There aren't many options for a woman in a town like this, especially one with a reputation for trouble." "You could leave," Ryder suggested gently. Fiona shook her head. "And go where? With what money? Besides, this is Ellie's home. She's already lost so much I can't uproot her again." Before Ryder could respond, there was a commotion at the front door. Mrs. Winters' voice rose in protest, followed by heavy footsteps. Sheriff Blackwood appeared in the doorway of the sitting room, his deputy Caleb Moore at his shoulder. Both men wore grim expressions. "Fiona Vance," the sheriff announced loudly enough for everyone in the house to hear, "you're under arrest for the assault of Jasper Mills." "What?" Fiona stood, her heart pounding. "You already dealt with this at the jailhouse." "New evidence has come to light," Blackwood said with a satisfied smirk. "Mr. Mills has suffered a concussion from your attack. The doctor confirms it. The mayor is pressing charges." Ryder stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Fiona. "This is harassment, Sheriff, and you know it." "Stay out of it, Weston," Blackwood warned. "Unless you want to join her in a cell." Mrs. Winters had appeared with Ellie, who looked terrified. "Sheriff, surely this can wait until morning," the landlady protested. "The girl needs medical attention herself after what you did to her face." "I don't know what she's told you," the sheriff said smoothly, "but any injuries she sustained were the result of resisting arrest." "That's a lie," Ellie burst out, her young face flushed with anger. Deputy Moore moved forward, reaching for Fiona's arm. "Come along now, Miss Vance. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Ryder's hand shot out, gripping the deputy's wrist before he could touch Fiona. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The room went still. Deputy Moore's eyes widened at the steel in Ryder's grip. "You're interfering with the law, Weston," Sheriff Blackwood said, his hand moving to rest on his gun. "I'm interfering with an injustice," Ryder countered. "Miss Vance defended her sister from a predator." "She's the victim here, not Jasper Mills." "That's not for you to decide," the sheriff growled. "No," Ryder agreed. "It's for a judge to decide. And I intend to make sure Miss Vance has proper representation when that time comes." Fiona stared at him in surprise. "Mr. Weston, in the meantime," Ryder continued, releasing the deputy's wrist but maintaining his protective stance, "I'll be personally guaranteeing Miss Vance's appearance in court. There's no need to lock her up tonight." Sheriff Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You have no authority here, stranger." "Perhaps not," Ryder acknowledged. but I do have the means to post bail if that's what it takes." A tense silence followed. Fiona could see the sheriff calculating, trying to determine if pursuing this confrontation was worth the risk. "Fine," Blackwood said finally. "Miss Vance can remain free for now, under your guarantee, but be at the mayor's office at 9 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning, both of you." He cast a final warning glance around the room. "And anyone thinking of helping this woman would do well to remember which side their bread is buttered on in this town." After the lawman departed, Mrs. Winters bustled about making tea to settle everyone's nerves. The other boarders offered sympathetic words before tactfully withdrawing, leaving Fiona, Ellie, and Ryder alone in the sitting room. "Why would you do that?" Fiona asked Ryder quietly. "You've known me less than a day." Ryder's expression was thoughtful as he gazed into the fire misses. Winters had lit to ward off the evening chill. "Sometimes a day is enough to recognize what's right. But you're risking a lot," she persisted. "Your money, you're standing in a town you just arrived in." "I came to Willow Creek looking for something," Ryder said. "I just didn't realize what it was until I saw you standing up to that drunk to protect your sister." He turned to face her fully. "Courage like that is rare, Miss Vance." Fiona felt her cheeks warm at the undisguised admiration in his eyes. "It wasn't courage, it was necessity." "The best kind of courage often is," Ryder replied with a small smile. Later, after Ellie had been persuaded to go to bed despite her protests, Fiona walked Ryder to the front porch of the boarding house. The night was clear, stars dusting the sky above the sleeping town. In the distance, a coyote called, the sound lonely and wild. "Where will you stay tonight?" Fiona asked, suddenly realizing she hadn't considered this practical detail. "I took a room at the hotel before dinner," Ryder assured her. He hesitated, then added, "I want you to know that I meant what I said. I'll stand by you tomorrow, whatever happens." Fiona studied him in the soft glow of light from the window. "Why? What do you get out of this?" Ryder's expression softened. "Not everything in life is a transaction, Fiona." The use of her first name sent an unexpected thrill through her. "In my experience, Mr. Weston, men don't offer help without expecting something in return." "Then you've known the wrong kind of men," he said simply. "And please call me Ryder." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and descended the porch steps, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness of the town's main street. Fiona stood watching long after he disappeared, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had brought Ryder Weston to Willow Creek on this of all days. Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. Fiona dressed carefully in her best skirt and shirtwaist, plaiting her dark hair into a neat coronet at the nape of her neck. Ellie watched anxiously from the edge of the bed they shared. "I want to come with you," the girl insisted for the third time. "No, Ellie," Fiona said firmly, adjusting her collar to hide the bruise forming on her neck where Sheriff Blackwood had grabbed her. "You'll go to school as usual. Mrs. Winters will walk you." "But what if they lock you up?" Ellie's voice trembled. What if Fiona knelt before her sister, taking her small hands? "Listen to me. No matter what happens today, we'll face it together, but I need you to be brave and carry on normally. Can you do that for me?" Ellie nodded reluctantly, her blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. Downstairs, Fiona found Mrs. Winters preparing a heartier than usual breakfast. "You'll need your strength today," the landlady said, pushing a plate of eggs and bacon toward her. Fiona tried to eat, but anxiety made each bite difficult to swallow. She was just finishing her coffee when a knock came at the door. Ryder stood on the porch, looking more formal than the day before. He'd shaved and wore a clean shirt with a string tie under his vest. His gun belt was conspicuously absent. "Good morning," he said, his eyes quickly assessing her. "You look ready." As I'll ever be, Fiona replied, forcing a smile for Ellie's benefit as her sister came to stand beside her. They walked together toward the mayor's office, a small but imposing brick building at the center of town. Already, curious townsfolk were gathering, news of the confrontation having spread overnight. "Don't let them intimidate you," Ryder said quietly as they approached. "Remember, you did nothing wrong." Inside, Mayor Harold Mills, a portly man with Jasper's same weak chin and close-set eyes, sat behind an ornate desk. Sheriff Blackwood stood at his shoulder like a faithful hound. Jasper himself occupied a chair to one side, a dramatic bandage wrapped around his head, his expression smug. "Miss Vance," the mayor said without preamble, "you stand accused of assaulting my cousin in an unprovoked attack. Sheriff Blackwood tells me you've been causing trouble in my town for some time now." "The attack was not unprovoked," Fiona said clearly. "Your cousin attempted to molest my 12-year-old sister." Mayor Mills waved a dismissive hand. "Jasper has explained that he was merely being friendly to the child. It seems you have a tendency to overreact, Miss Vance." "Being friendly doesn't involve dragging a girl behind a building against her will," Ryder interjected, his voice level but firm. The mayor's gaze shifted to him. "And you are, Ryder Weston. I witnessed the aftermath of the incident. Mr. Weston is new in town," Sheriff Blackwood added with a meaningful look at the mayor. "Seems he's taken a particular interest in Miss Vance's situation." "I see." Mayor Mills leaned back in his chair. "Well, Mr. Weston, while we appreciate newcomers to Willow Creek, I must point out that you know nothing of Miss Vance's history of insubordination and troublemaking." "I know what I saw," Ryder replied calmly. "And I know that in civilized communities, men who prey on young girls are punished, not protected." A dangerous flush crept up the mayor's neck. "Are you implying something about my cousin, sir?" "I'm stating it plainly," Ryder said, "and I suspect I'm not the only one in town who knows the truth." Mayor Mills slammed his palm on the desk. "This is outrageous." "Sheriff, I want this man." "Before you finish that sentence," Ryder interrupted, "you should know that I've already sent a telegram to Judge Morrison in Denver. He's an old friend of my father's. I've requested his presence to oversee any legal proceedings against Miss Vance." The mayor froze, his mouth still open. Sheriff Blackwood's expression darkened. "Judge Morrison is known for his particular interest in cases involving the mistreatment of women and children," Ryder continued conversationally. "I imagine he'd be quite interested in the pattern of behavior that seems to be tolerated in Willow Creek." A heavy silence fell over the room. Fiona stared at Ryder, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "You're bluffing," Sheriff Blackwood said finally. "Judge Morrison wouldn't come all the way from Denver for something like this." "Would you care to wager on that?" Ryder asked, his expression deadly serious. "Because I guarantee he'll be on the next train if I send a follow-up telegram describing how the sheriff of Willow Creek physically assaulted a young woman in his custody." Mayor Mills and the sheriff exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Jasper shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Perhaps," the mayor said slowly, "we've been hasty in pursuing formal charges in this matter." "Perhaps," Ryder agreed with a slight nod. "The town has always valued Miss Vance's contribution as a teacher," Mayor Mills continued as if this had been his position all along. "It would be a shame to lose her over a misunderstanding." Fiona could scarcely believe what she was hearing. The mayor was backing down. "A misunderstanding," she repeated, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Is that what we're calling it when a grown man tries to drag a child behind a building?" "Fiona," Ryder said softly, a gentle warning in his tone. She took a deep breath, understanding. This wasn't justice, but it was a reprieve. "Of course," she said with forced calm. "A misunderstanding. It won't happen again." She looked directly at Jasper as she added, "As long as certain individuals keep their distance from my sister and other young girls in town." Mayor Mills cleared his throat. "Yes, well, I'm sure everyone has learned a valuable lesson. Sheriff, I believe we can consider this matter closed." Outside, the morning sun had risen higher, burning away the lingering coolness of dawn. Fiona stood on the steps of the mayor's office, feeling oddly light-headed. Did that really just happen? She asked Ryder as they walked away from the curious onlookers who had gathered. "It did," he confirmed with a slight smile, "though I suspect it's more of a ceasefire than a true peace." "Did you really contact a judge in Denver?" Ryder's smile widened. "Judge Morrison exists, and he is indeed a friend of my family. But no, I haven't had time to send any telegrams." A startled laugh escaped Fiona. "You bluffed them." "Sometimes the appearance of influence is as effective as the real thing," Ryder said with a shrug. "Though I will send that telegram today, just to be safe." They walked in companionable silence for a moment, heading instinctively toward the schoolhouse where Fiona would normally be teaching at this hour. "What will you do now?" she asked finally. "About your plans to buy land, I mean." Ryder's pace slowed. "I'm still interested in settling here," he said carefully, "though I imagine I've made some powerful enemies this morning." "The Mills family doesn't own everything in Willow Creek," Fiona assured him. "There are good people here, too." "I've noticed," Ryder said, his gaze warm as it rested on her face. Fiona felt her cheeks color. "Mr. Weston Ryder, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done." "You don't need to thank me," he said simply, "but I would like to call on you properly if you'll permit it." The request, so formal and unexpected, made Fiona's heart skip. "Call on me, for dinner perhaps, or a walk on Sunday after church." His expression grew serious. "I meant what I said yesterday. There was a reason I came to Willow Creek, though I didn't know it until I saw you." "You don't even know me," Fiona protested weakly, even as something warm and hopeful unfurled in her chest. "I know enough," Ryder said. "I know you're brave and loyal and fierce in protecting those you love. I know you have integrity in a town that seems to value connections over character." He took a step closer. "And I know that from the moment I saw you standing up to Jasper Mills, I couldn't look away." Fiona's breath caught at the sincerity in his voice. "Yes," she said finally. "You may call on me." The smile that transformed Ryder's face made him suddenly, strikingly handsome. "Sunday, then, after church." In the weeks that followed, Ryder Weston became a fixture in Willow Creek. He purchased a modest ranch property on the outskirts of town, far enough from the Mills family holdings to avoid direct conflict, but close enough for frequent visits to the boarding house where Fiona and Ellie lived. Sunday walks became a tradition, with Ellie often accompanying them in the beginning. As summer bloomed across the Colorado countryside, so too did the connection between Fiona and Ryder. He told her of his life in Wyoming, of the ranch he'd built with his father, and the loneliness that had driven him to seek a fresh start after the older man's death. She shared stories of her parents, of her dreams for Ellie's future, and of her own secret hope to someday open a proper school where girls could receive an education equal to boys. When Sheriff Blackwood attempted to have Fiona removed from her teaching position, citing moral concerns, the town council found itself facing an unexpected opponent. Ryder, leveraging his growing influence as a property owner and his genuine friendship with Judge Morrison, who did indeed pay a visit to Willow Creek, successfully argued for her retention. The tentative peace established that day in the mayor's office gradually solidified. Jasper Mills, perhaps finally understanding the precariousness of his position, left town for Denver, ostensibly to pursue business opportunities, but more likely fleeing the increased scrutiny of his behavior. By autumn, when the aspen trees blazed gold against the mountainsides, Ryder had become a respected member of the community. His fair business practices and willingness to help neighbors in need had won over even some of the mayor's staunchest allies. And Fiona, to her own surprise, found herself blossoming under the steady warmth of Ryder's attention. The caution she'd built around her heart after years of bearing sole responsibility for Ellie gradually gave way to trust, and then to something deeper. It was on a crisp October evening, with the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks, that Ryder asked Fiona to marry him. They were standing on the porch of his newly completed ranch house, the windows glowing with lamplight behind them. "I know it hasn't been very long," he said, holding her hands in his, "but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Fiona Vance. Your courage, your kindness, your fierce heart. I want to build a life with you and Ellie here." Fiona looked past him to the comfortable home he'd created, to the land stretching toward the mountains, and then back to his earnest face. "The sheriff will hate it," she said with a small smile. "The mayor, too," Ryder chuckled. "All the more reason to say yes." "Yes," Fiona whispered, stepping into his embrace. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their wedding in November caused quite the stir in Willow Creek. Despite the opposition of the Mills family and Sheriff Blackwood, the little church was filled to capacity. Mrs. Winters cried openly as she adjusted Fiona's veil, and Ellie beamed as she walked ahead of her sister down the aisle, scattering late-season wildflowers. Judge Morrison himself came from Denver to perform the ceremony, his presence a not-so-subtle reminder of the law's true purpose to protect all citizens, not just the powerful. As Fiona and Ryder spoke their vows before the gathered community, she caught sight of Sheriff Blackwood standing at the back of the church, his expression unreadable. For a moment, their eyes met, and Fiona lifted her chin slightly. Not in defiance, but in the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her place and her strength. The sheriff was the first to look away. Years passed, and Willow Creek changed. The railroad came, bringing new opportunities and new faces. Mayor Mills eventually lost his position to a progressive businessman who championed education and equality. Sheriff Blackwood retired, replaced by a younger man with a stronger sense of justice. And on the Weston ranch, life flourished. Ellie grew into a confident young woman, attending a teaching college in Denver before returning to help establish the girls' school that had been Fiona's dream. The Weston family expanded with the arrival of twin boys, followed 2 years later by a daughter who inherited her mother's dark hair and determined spirit. On warm summer evenings, Fiona and Ryder would often sit on their porch, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set behind the mountains. Sometimes, Fiona would think back to that day outside the general store, when she'd bloodied her knuckles defending Ellie from Jasper Mills. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder asked one such evening, his hand finding hers as they rocked side by side. "How strange life is," Fiona replied, squeezing his fingers. "If Jasper hadn't accosted Ellie that day, if I hadn't fought back, if you hadn't been standing in that saloon doorway, then I'd have found another way to meet you," Ryder said with the certainty that had always been his strength. "Some things are meant to be, Fiona." She smiled, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "You really believe that?" "I do," he said, bringing her hand to his lips. "I came to Willow Creek looking for land, but I found a home instead. I found you." In the distance, the church bell rang, calling the town to evening services. The children came running, knowing it was time to wash up for dinner. Ellie called from the kitchen that the biscuits were ready. And Fiona Vance Weston, Once an orphan defending her sister against all odds, now surrounded by the family she and Ryder had built together, knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged.